From Season 3, Episode 1 begins in the same hospital room that Season 2 Episode 10 concluded, with Tabitha waking up to the biggest shock of her life. She ventured out of her home in fville to solve the unsettling mystery at the location, making her way to the lighthouse tower, and climbing all the way to the top. The weird boy in white clothing arrived out of nowhere and shoved her from the tower, claiming that this was the only way she could possibly be spared. When the woman awoke a few days later, she was back in her old environment, surrounded by other people and sophisticated technology. Although her husband and 2 children were still trapped in the parallel reality time loop, or whatever fville is, Tabitha had managed to escape and return to the actual world in an unknown manner. The nurse who was caring for her told her that a group of hikers had discovered her in a forest and transported her to the hospital, which is now located in Camden, Maine. She then asks Tabitha if she remembers anything about what happened to her, including the numerous bruises and damage marks on her body. Tabitha is unable to discuss the marks she received during her long and grueling journey through the forests and caves with the nurse, so she chooses to remain mute. However, when Tabitha learns that several police officers will be visiting shortly to question her because she has not yet been identified, she chooses to flee the hospital to avoid more difficulty. Nobody would believe her version of the bizarre events at fville. Instead, the police officers would admit her to a mental health hospital and limit her freedom. Tabitha Matthews sneaks out of the hospital and onto the streets after finding and changing into her original clothes. She is still unsure what to do with her newfound freedom. On the main road, she notices the boy in white waving at her, and is immediately intrigued to learn more about her position. Despite returning to the real world, Tabitha remains deeply concerned about her husband and children, and she naturally seeks more answers from the kid. She still wonders what the boy was talking about when he claimed taking her off the tower was the only way, so she follows him. However, the youngster appears to have been a hallucination or an apparition, as he is no longer present after Tabitha crosses the road. She follows a boy dressed in white into a neighboring store, only to discover that he is not the same person from fville, but rather an ordinary child in the real world. Disappointed and perplexed about her future moves, she continues to wander aimlessly before borrowing a phone to call her mother, with whom she has not spoken in a long time. What's Jim Matthews up to? Back in fville, Jim and his children are devastated by Tabitha's departure, as no one knows where she is. Ethan, a small boy who thinks of the positive before the negatives, is certain that his mother is lost in the jungle and requires their assistance. Convinced that she has to be saved from the jungle, Ethan attempts to flee town and go to his mother's rescue on his own, but is stopped by Tianchen Lu. Julie, on the other hand, is at an age when pessimism outshines hope, especially in this cruel and twisted reality, and she is almost certain that Tabitha died during her excursion in the forest. Although Julie repeatedly tells her father that he is not responsible for her mother's disappearance, it is clear that Julie blames Jim, at least to some extent, for the predicament. With his children's 2 contrasting reactions, both of which reflect how disturbed they are about their mother's abduction, Jim resolves to take matters into his own hands. Jim wants to go to the forest and find Tabitha without thinking too much about it, so he asks Boyd Stevens for aid. Boyd had traveled through the wilderness with Sarah Myers, and faced extreme situations alone. The sheriff initially tries to talk Jim out of such a risky excursion into the forest, especially given the fear of monsters after dark, but Jim is desperate to find his wife. Boyd eventually recounts how he and Sarah discovered the lighthouse in the forest, reminiscing about a specific stone cabin with a talisman and a tent where they sought shelter. According to him, Jim must spend each night at the hut, venturing out in a different direction throughout the day until he discovers the lighthouse, and then returning to the hut at sunset. He also tells Jim to locate the tent if feasible, as it was teleported via the mysterious remote forests, and can guide him there as well. Finally, Boyd instructs Jim to seek out spiderwebs hanging from the trees in the forest, as this would indicate that he is on the correct track, as he too had to trek through spiderwebs. What new threats are residents facing? The possibility of a catastrophic food shortage has been emphasized since Season 2, and it is now a very real problem at the start of Season 3. With fewer crops growing as a result of the horrible rainstorm, the people of County House experimented with a new kind of farming, growing vegetables within covered containers. However, when Donna and Ellis go to check on them in from Season 3 Episode 1, they discover that all of the crops have died, and there is absolutely no food growing in the village. Donna feels that the town's soil has been poisoned, most likely as a result of the storm, and that growing vegetables in various parts of the town is impossible on such short notice. Although the animals, cows, goats and sheep, were always kept to produce milk and wool, there is no other alternative left than to butcher them for food. The mysteries of fville will hopefully begin to clear up in the next episodes of the new season, while Kenny losing another of his parents on Boyd's watch may once again cause problems among the locals. The food crisis has already forced people to compete for supplies, and the situation will only worsen from here. It will be intriguing to see if Tabitha can help her family in the real world, as she may soon discover some crucial clues from Victor's father there.